Alright, this video will cover setting up the SAP Labs. And this is for instructors, if you're a student watching this. Okay, this is for your instructor. This is for the SAP Labs within the ERPsim Supplemental textbook, this one here. You'll also need the SAP GUI and class list. We'll get into all of that. And again, this is for instructors. Seriously, if you're a student, there's nothing for you to see. There's no background information. You're going to learn something. I don't know. As an instructor, you need to be a member of the University Alliance. That allows you to request the ERPsim client. There is only one ERPsim client, so whatever you order will be good. You should be ERPsim Level 1 certified. It's not actually required, but then if you need some help with something from ERPsim, they're not going to respond to you unless you're actually ERPsim certified. You're welcome to contact me as well, but I can't help you with system issues. I'm not really able to log on. So I'm probably not going to be very good help for that. It's probably better for you to talk to the UCC or ERPsim itself. Again, this is for the ERPsim textbook only. So this is the Supplemental ERPsim SAP Labs and textbook. It should look like this. This is not the setup for Fitter Snacker, GBI, Classic Rocker, whatever else you might be using. This is just for this textbook's SAP Labs. If you're doing anything else, this does not apply. If you are using anything but the second edition, it does not apply as well. The first edition does not work anymore. You can try to get through it, but it doesn't work, so no point in even trying. Any second edition, the current version looks like this, second edition revised. There is a second edition, there's a second edition R, it was a mini revision. This may be a video for a future version, revised 2, I don't know. It will stay second edition until they change ERPsim's manufacturing game so much that it has to be rewritten. So any second edition will work. If you're using a third edition, it's probably not going to work for that, but any version of the second edition. Requirements: students must have a copy of the textbook. There isn't a digital version of it, so it would need to be a paper version of it. I don't recommend sharing the book. In the past, I've had students try to save some money and share it. It's so specific, you have to literally be on the exact same step all the way through. There's places where you're writing things in. I think it's just easier to have your own book. It's not that expensive. So I just recommend they each have their own textbook. You'll also need the ERPsim client. Again, any ERPsim, there's only one. There is the HANA version. Completely unnecessary. So just make sure you've ordered the ERPsim client from your UCC. You also need the SAP GUI. There's a new version every, 9 to 12 months. It works with older versions. The screenshots may not match. The screenshots currently are for the 7.4 version. I know 7.5 is out as I'm making this video. Works exactly the same. Looks a little different, but works exactly the same. Shouldn't be an issue if it's an older version or a newer version. Just make sure that it's able to connect to the UCC's SAP server. I've had some students, mostly grad students, that have a company laptop with SAP installed, and they are unable to connect to a server outside of their actual network. So just make sure it's not just have the SAP GUI, it is an SAP GUI with the security privileges to be able to access any server. So make sure they can access your assigned server from the UCC. Again, you need to be a member of the University Alliance and preferably an ERPsim certified instructor as well, so you've been through the ERPsim workshop. What you do not need: a class set up in the ERPsim learning portal. So if you've been through the ERPsim training, the workshop, you know how to set up the learning portal. This is required for running the distribution game. You need to have paid students if you're running the actual ERPsim manufacturing game, whether it's intro, extended, or advanced. The logistics game, all of those require a class and paid participants. Distribution game only requires a class setup, but that is not necessary at all for the labs themselves. You do not need the simulation running. This is all, you're running everything as if the simulation doesn't exist. You're using actual out-of-the-box SAP transactions. So no simulation. It actually messes it up if you're trying to run it at the same time. So really you don't need anything. Your students only need the textbook. That's it. And the SAP GUI. If you're using a computer lab that already has it, they just need the textbook. So that's nice. You can use these labs really without running ERPsim, and you can consider this maybe an intro course. So if you have a course that you know you want to do, maybe a fair amount of lecture, maybe even using another textbook, but you want them to be able to use some sort of SAP Labs, feel free to use this. All you have to do is order the ERPsim client, and again, you need nothing else. You don't need anything but the client. So no additional pay, no simulations, anything like that. So I know of some professors who are using it with, I think, Brett Wagner's book, Fitter Snacker, and then they're using my labs for the actual stepping through the processes. Not exactly a one-to-one, but I guess they like my labs better? I don't know. So just realize that you don't have to have anything beyond the client. Keep in mind, I've been using these labs for years. This is only the second edition of the book, but it's been in design for years. I've had hundreds of students use it. I have no expectation that any student actually learns something from doing the labs within my class. Really, it's just pressing buttons. It's getting through the labs. I give them a week or two to get through them, and all I expect is that they've pressed buttons. So what's the point? Well, for me, in my class, it's SAP navigation. If they can get through these labs, or they can complete, so Lab 1 feeds into Lab 2, Lab 2 feeds into Lab 3, if they can get all the way through Lab 3, I know they can navigate SAP. Perfect. So it's making it so the learning curve, we've gotten past that, so we can really start jumping into strategy as quickly as possible. So for me, that's all I'm ever trying to do with these labs. But any student who wants to learn a little bit more, if you want them to learn the processes, you want them to learn the transactions, it might take going through the labs a few times. It might say maybe by the second or third lab as they're reading along and really understanding what's happening. So keep that in mind. I don't know of any SAP labs that are like this, the cash-to-cash business cycle, that really students are going to learn something from it. It really ends up being pressing buttons. I've done GBI, I've done Fitter Snacker, I've used the actual ERPsim Labs cash-to-cash cycle, and I don't think it's any more than pressing buttons unless you do it a few times. Now, something to consider if you are going to be using the simulation, if you have students paying for the simulation, you could do something where you're using a combination of these labs and the simulation. So you could do something like maybe the intro scenario that comes with some inventory in the beginning, and you can start running the simulation and then pause it, and they have to go in and whatever, complete sales orders, complete the bookkeeping, the accounts payable, accounts receivable. Whatever it may be, you might use a combination where you're referring to the textbook, maybe a few sections of the textbook, those labs, along with the simulation. But again, that is completely unnecessary if you're not planning on doing that. It's not something I do within my course, but it's something to consider for you. So setting it up, that's why you're watching the video. The first thing you do is log on to your UCC assigned server. And what is it? What is the server? Well, if you don't know, you need to talk to your University Alliance coordinator at your university to get the server and the client. Or if you're the person who orders your own, it depends on how your university is set up. If you already know what the server and client is, you just need to log on. If you have not ordered it yet, realize that you need it about 7 to 10 days before you're going to use it to give them plenty of time to set it up, and then you want to go in and check some things as well. So once you have that information, you want to log in to the SAP client. If you have access to the UCC information as well, this is the UWM UCC, what it looks for. And yes, I did a very ugly redaction here because I want you to know I'm definitely not showing you what I'm doing. I don't want you to see the client that has been assigned to me. So here it is. This is what yours is going to look like. Just make sure that you have the system ID, the client, and then, of course, these are the admin passwords as well. So once you have that, let me jump to the next page here. All right. Oh, I'm glad I put this in here. I'm just reminding myself. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, explaining it is outside the scope of this video. So you need to contact your University Alliance coordinator at your university, or contact your UCC and ask them, how do I get the ERPsim client? And then they will walk you through the steps. I know the UWM UCC had videos, may have new videos. Make sure you're watching those if you don't know, but that's outside the scope of this video. Alright, so logging on to SAP, the first time you log on, it will ask you to change your password. You'll be logging in as admin. An actual user has nothing, you have to log on as the admin. And once you're logged on, you're going to run zsim_start. So here is my GUI. And it's right there on the admin page, so I'm logged in as admin1. And this, if you've been through the ERPsim training, this should be a familiar site. This is how you set everything up. This is all on the user side, so this doesn't have a whole lot to do with the system or what's happening within your company or the simulation. This sets it up for the simulation. It sets it up also for the labs. You can see over here that it's set up for the manufacturing extended, but it says the last setup was run on July 4th, 2017. You can see here that was in the past. If you're using the 2017-2018 client, every time you log on, at least for the UWM UCC, it will tell you that it hasn't been run until you run it. It'll tell you July 4th, 2017. That is literally the date that they copied the client from HEC Montreal onto your UCC server. So anytime it's refreshed, anytime you order a new client, that's what it's going to say. Once you're logged in, you want to set the client for the extended manufacturing game scenario, and that's it. That's all you have to do. Click Extended, Manufacturing Game, some Muesli Products, Extended, Execute, and it'll run through. And what it's doing right now is it's setting up posting periods, so all the accounting is set up so that it's actually able to receive things. Look, it was that quick. I am now ready to run the SAP Labs. Just make sure you're doing the manufacturing game. It does say Extended right here in the logistics game. That can sometimes be confusing if you jump down too far. Just make sure you're setting up for the extended manufacturing game. And quite literally, that's it. So it says setup completed successfully at the bottom there. Come on. Hello, there we are. In addition to this, make sure I didn't miss anything, I clicked it twice. You need to also, following the textbook instructions, you need to assign for each student a company code, a user ID, and a product with a material code. Now, if you read the instructions within the textbook itself, all you really need to do is assign them a user ID, and they should be able to figure out the company code and the product and material code from that. I like to go ahead and just tell them flat out what it is, even though you don't have to. If you just give them a user ID, that should do it. And all students will end up using the same server, client, and temporary password, which for the 2017-2018 version is always uppercase ERPsim. As far as assigning these, if you look at the textbook within the instructions for the labs, you will see, where'd it go? There we go. A reference to something like this. So it'll tell you the different students. I had the Beatles in my class, so mine had their names in here. And you'll see the students' names for group 1, and then this is the company code, your actual user ID, the SIM ID, the material code, and then what the product is. So looking at the instructions, this is what students are going to be expecting. This is also on the course website as a download, so a version of this that you can convert to whatever it is you need. What I do with my classes that actually meet in class, I pass this around before every class. They sign in, and then they always know what their user ID is. For this, for the labs, they're going to use this all the way through labs 1, 2, and 3. For online classes that I've taught, I try to keep it so that they don't work in groups, because that's kind of tough to get people to work together. So I just give each student as their own company. Obviously, you can only have 26, so hopefully your online class isn't that big. Modify it as necessary. Maybe you need 2 clients. Hopefully you can figure that out on your own. But I just go ahead and give everybody their own, and everybody ends up producing nut. That ends up making it a little easier for me as well, because then I can go in and just look at the results, and everybody should have the exact same results. So just realize in one way or another you need to be giving them this information. Again, just the user ID will tell them their company code, because A1 goes to A, and the material code is F01. If they were, I can show you here, if it's A2, company code A, 2 is F02, which is blueberry, A3, company code A, F03, strawberry. I think you're getting the idea there. So all you really need to do is give them this, and the instructions in the labs will walk them through it. But again, I like to just give it to them. This is on the course website as well. So all students will be using the same server and client and temporary password. For me, I give that to them in a PowerPoint on the day of class that they're going to be using it. And here we go. And then I also post it on, we have D2L. I post it on D2L, we're using Blackboard, Canvas, whatever. I post something like, here's the server, here's the client, here's the temporary password. When you log in, it's going to ask you for a new password. Make sure you write it down, because every time you log on for Labs 1, 2, and 3, you're going to need to use that password. So this is something I just post as a document on D2L. However you want to get that message across is up to you. Just realize they'll all need to know that. And I'm slowly moving between slides today. Okay, so again, it's that easy, but really it's not that easy. I've done this for years. I have hundreds of students, and I still have issues. So I have written these instructions within the labs, set my students to go use them, and then I've literally walked around with a book. And as they ask questions, I mark, this question came up, rewrite this so that this doesn't happen. I have rewritten the instructions as best as I possibly can. There are some areas that if students are running too fast, they're going to get messed up anyway. No matter how I rewrite the instructions, they're going to get kind of messed up one way or another. So how do you fix errors from students rushing through it? You never really know. But keep in mind you're using standard SAP transactions. This is not customized transactions. If you Google it, so ME21N is a standard SAP transaction. If someone's having a problem with it, Google it. In addition, practice, practice, practice. I assure you that as you are practicing these labs, there is no way you'll make the same mistakes as students. But if you know what's coming next, if you know what they should be seeing, if you know it really well, you should be able to at least figure out where it probably went wrong. But it's tough. Troubleshooting, it's very difficult to predict what students will do. In addition, it's difficult for me to predict what you will do as an instructor. There are ways that you can make mistakes as well. So overall, I suggest practice, practice, practice. Before you do these labs, run through them a couple of times, maybe once a day for a week. Put some distance between them. Give yourself a couple of weeks, and maybe the day of, if you can't go through it without any issues, you keep practicing. So again, practice, 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 know what it's supposed to be happening. But when it comes down to troubleshooting, you're going to run into some issues. Just to let you know, the only system error I've seen, now there used to be some more errors in the past, but they've really fixed the simulation and the client, so there aren't as many. But there are still some system errors, and I do have it in quotes. You get these odd errors when trying to complete transactions, and it'll say things like, no authorization in whatever for this, blah, blah, blah. One example is when you are doing the purchase order and you put in purchasing group 100, it'll pop back and tell you there's no authorization for it. So this is, in quotes, a system error. Sometimes there are unexpected stock requirements list where it's showing you items you're not expecting. The most likely reason for this is either zsim_start wasn't executed or it was set for the wrong scenario. So I showed you before where it had the extended manufacturing game and the extended logistics game. If you accidentally set it for the extended logistics game, you can get kind of far within these labs without problems, and then all of a sudden things stop working. And you say, oh no, the system, no, it's not the system. It just wasn't set up properly. So again, this is on your end. Sometimes there are errors running zsim_start, or maybe it doesn't update one user ID. There's a lot of different parameters that are being set when it's running this. it's highly possible that it would miss something. I actually haven't seen it for a while. They've really gotten the clients nice and tight. I haven't really seen these errors, but every once in a while, maybe one student in a group has a username, a user that hasn't been set up properly. So it's these kinds of things, zsim_start. If you're running everything the way you should be, you're probably not going to see these, but every once in a while, just be ready for it. Another one that I see, students don't write down the information. So the last page of the book is the relevant information form. I have no idea why, but every semester I have someone who ignores this. So it says throughout Labs 1, 2, and 3, write this down on line whatever, and make sure that you have it there. It's not really crucial for Lab 1 or Lab 2, except for troubleshooting. If they run into an issue and they're asking you questions, it's a lot easier for you to go to that relevant information form and see what it is. But if they get through Labs 1 and 2 without an issue, and then they try to do Lab 3, well, it's required there. And that's when they say, I didn't write these down. Okay. I don't know why they don't do these things. I actually have it written. If you're reading through the labs, you'll see I'll have a little kind of dashed box that says, do not ignore this. It says in busy work. But they do. I don't know why. So if you look at the bottom of the relevant information form, the last page of the book, you'll see a list of transactions. It'll say if you don't have this information, this is where you can find it. There are no instructions there. It just says this is it. Now these are standard SAP transactions, so again you can Google it. They can Google it. You can make them Google it and figure it out. They made the mistake. Or you can try to help them with it. I recommend you get to know those transactions and where that information is within those transactions. You never really know what they're going to forget to write down or choose not to write down, and it's good for you to know where they are just in case. So go through those transactions that are listed there. Once you complete other labs, go back and try to look for that information so you have a general idea of where it is. Most other mistakes that I've seen from students are from moving too fast. So the instructions themselves are a combination of screenshots and text. And if people are going through trying to get finished with these as fast as they can, just looking at pictures and pressing buttons, they're very likely to miss an instruction or a step. So that's most likely what is happening if someone has an issue. How to troubleshoot, how to fix those, it's really hard. It depends on what they missed. So again, I tried to write these instructions, so it's trying to avoid those things. But again, if they're going fast, it's hard to tell what it is. Sometimes it's something like the first person into a transaction sees everybody else's information and they process everybody's and they don't bother to tell anyone. And then the next person comes in and says, hey, where's my whatever accounting invoice? Oh, well, you can't come over and help them with that because somebody else already ran through it. Oftentimes they won't tell you that's what they did. So really it just comes down to practice. So my best advice is to practice, practice, practice. The more times you do this, the easier it will be. But again, if you've done any of the other labs that are out there, GPI, Fitter Snacker, I've really tried to make these labs as, I don't want to say foolproof, but less likely to be an issue. They've been written that way. So again, practice, 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 and good luck.